call a meeting to order of Silver Falls School District. Do we have Derek on Zoom?
No, he just texted me he's having trouble, so I will
Okay.
work with you. I know I can.
Okay. We have 6 of us present, 5 of us present here, and then Derek's going to be getting on Zoom, hopefully. And flag salute.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Agenda review. Entertain a motion to accept the agenda as is.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Been moved in second to accept the agenda as presented. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda as posted.
Second.
Been moved in second to approve the consent agenda as posted. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Okay. And we are to you, Emily, Silver Falls Education Association. Welcome back.
Thank you. Well, good evening, school board members, and congratulations to our 2 new and 1 returning school board members. We look really forward to working with you this year. My name is Emily Rayo, and I'm the new-ish, as of June, elected SFEA president for the Silver Falls Education Association. This year, I am teaching 6th through 8th grade at Butte Creek and 6th through 8th grade at Scotts Mills. For a fun time. I'm glad to be back in middle school land, though. Also on our executive board is Katie Panovich. She is returning as our co-vice president, and she teaches 5th grade at Robert Frost. John Harrington is our newly elected co-vice president, and he might walk in at any time. We're usually like 6:45. And he's our district behavior specialist for too many schools for me to count anymore. I give up. There's like 6 or 7 of them, and they're always changing. And Erin Scott also returns this year as our treasurer. She teaches kindergarten at Mark Twain. And taking my spot at secretary is Allison Alston, and she teaches science here at the high school. The purpose of our monthly board address is to ensure that the school board, and by extension, the public understands the working conditions and experiences for our licensed staff. We ensure that our students are the center of every choice we make, and their learning environment is our working environment. It is essential to understand the realities that we face every day, and this includes our best days, like watching the Foxes win their first home football game last Friday, and our most challenging days. Last year brought the most challenges that no one thought possible, but we are thankful that we have survived and made it through. This year brings its own challenges and learning curves. Elementary teachers spent last week setting up new classrooms and learning about their new reading curriculum. I know several of ours at Butte Creek were talking about their new phonics curriculum today. And all but 4 schools in our district have new building principals as well. There have been numerous staff movements. Teachers are in classes, class types, or grade levels that they've never taught before, and a student success coach now teaching a self-contained middle school classroom. It's not to say that I'm excited about it, but it is a nice learning curve.
That was real slick. That was great.
Most of which occurred at the last minute. So staff are in uncharted waters again, and the lack of normalcy has just become our new normal. However, when I watched our licensed staff reconnect during in-service week, what I witnessed was excitement and curiosity. Teachers the last 2 weeks were eager to meet their new students, teach former students again, and collaborate with their new colleagues. However, that is not to say that things aren't still hard. We met with our building representatives earlier today, and we were presented with concerns about larger class sizes than last year, or even larger than the last several years. And we are not seeing more licensed staff or classified to support them. Looking at class size averages is a good baseline, but it doesn't add the human element into what we're experiencing every day in our rooms. We've got 41 students currently in AP Psych, and a couple of those students are on modified diplomas. We've got 34 students in a couple of our middle school English classes, and then add to that the heat last week. Without AC in a lot of our buildings, it becomes a very sticky, sweaty situation. I personally watched my classroom reach 82 degrees with 77% humidity. We all just didn't touch ourselves for an hour.
We were about 87 in our classroom. Literal sweat dripping as I just stood.
With nothing touching.
The tone of this school year starts with you all as school board members, and we are really grateful for your commitment to serve our school and our community. But please keep asking questions and looking at the whole picture. The decisions that you make in these board meetings have a ripple effect that changes our day-to-day experience as staff, as well as our students' day-to-day experiences. Please never lose sight of that, and as the school year progresses, we want to remind you as a school board that to consider the choices that best fit the students across our entire district. Thank you. That's it. It's good to be back.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, did we have anyone present to give public comment? Do we have anyone online for public comment?
There's 4 people online.
Daniel's not saying anything.
Hang on just a second.
Are we good?
None.
No.
Going once, going twice.
Okay. Staff report, superintendent report. Kim, you're up first.
Okay, hang on just a second. I'm trying to get my volume on. Okay. Daniel, can you bring my PowerPoint up, please? Yeah, he knows it. I know. He talked to me about it. Sorry. Little tech delay here. Hold on just a second. I see him working in the background.
Let's go.
No, not quite. While we're waiting on Daniel for the PowerPoint, you have an attachment in your board packet. It's called the Economic Forecast, Fall 2025. And I included that letter in the board packet because I think it's good to really track how the state's doing. And so this letter has some really important information that I wanted to share with you this evening. And they were alarmed initially with what is happening in the state, but it's not quite as urgent as we thought it might be. So this letter explains really well the report we got from COSA and from OSBA and some of our partners. The bullet points on the letter, economic growth is slowing, but a recession is not imminent, so that's good. The general fund and lottery resources available for the 25-27 biennium are down $954 million, which is about a 2.5% increase. The passage of Federal House Resolution HR 1, which is referred to now, includes federal tax cuts, which impacts Oregon's personal and business income taxes. When taxable income is reduced to changes in the federal tax code, Oregon's taxable income is also reduced. And this can result in a reduction in state tax collections. To compound things further, the Oregon unemployment rate just increased to over 5%, which is the highest amount since 2021. The corporate activity tax forecast for the biennium shows a slight decrease of about $4.3 million. This could impact the Student Success Act, which is where we get between $4 and $5 million worth of grant funding in the student investment account. Tom would have the exact number, but there's a large reserve of $100 million, and that does not require governor or legislature action to utilize that. There's 3 key takeaways for this. The news means that it's time to plan, not panic. Oregon maintains healthy reserves of $3.49 billion, and there are still 21 months left in the current budget cycle. Much can change in that span of time, and this advance notice gives us time to prepare. We are not alone. Our partners continue to provide timely information and advocate for K-12 education and strong educational support for funding in education. And then one thing to note is that academic and mental health challenges have not diminished for our kids. And with added federal uncertainty around cuts to SNAP, Medicaid, and K-12 funding, our most vulnerable students will require dedicated state-level support. As a district, our highest priority is the health and well-being of our students, and we can't overlook prioritizing these needs during budget discussions and strategic planning. So I did just want to share that with you. Initially, you know, the superintendent's group was very concerned because, you know, when we had an economic downturn like this in 2008, we were actually asked to reduce budgets mid-year. And we don't think that's the case this time. But so we wanted to share that information with you. But it does mean that we need to be cautious with how we budget, and we can't, you know, lose track of the details. And so we'll be very mindful, you know, when we plan our budget for next year. We are expecting a 25 to 30% decrease in title funds from the federal level for next year, for next budget cycle. And what that does for us is we have 4.58, I think, FTE in Title I. So if we lose 25% of that, that means that's a teacher that we have to find some room for in general fund. The Title I funding is for reading specialists and all those really important positions that help kids in our elementary buildings learn how to read and do math. So those are really important positions for the district. So I wanted to share that with you so that you would have the latest information. And as these come out, I will continue to update you. Daniel?
So I understand better. What are those predictions based on?
Those are based on the economic forecast that the state of Oregon released.
No, that part. But you were talking about Title I.
That was just
and you
that
involved
was-
the federal government planning, which is obviously very unpredictable. Because for a while we thought it was going to be down this year, then ended up being higher.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I just heard that from COSA, so I'm not sure what their source is. I could find out the source. Have you heard the source of that, Tony? That 27%?
Oh yeah, there's been some of the people on the House Budget Committee and whatnot that have said as part of what they're looking at in their resolution coming up for federal funds, that they do anticipate that there's going to be a reduction in some of the title programs, which is kind of what we thought 6 months ago, because 6 months ago what it was kind of like to put a feeler out there to see how it was. Now the reason why it didn't get cut right now is because you were in the mini, it was based on this current budget cycle,
Yeah,
and that's why there were a lot of legal challenges to it.
Yeah, it's already been appropriated. It hasn't been appropriated for next year.
Yeah, so that's from the budget committee and the chairs of their budget committee at the federal level who are saying that what they're going to bring forward is going to have some of those same reductions that they kind of tested the waters with before.
And we heard that from a source at the state level. So they were on a superintendent's meeting, and so I think it's pretty accurate information.
There's also discussion at the federal level, though, those dollars will flow to the state and then the state back to the district. So
Yeah.
it's really fluid right now. So I think
We'll
you made a
keep
statement that don't get too excited yet.
Yeah. We're trying not to get excited
Either way.
about any of
Yeah.
it.
Can't get excited.
They do a lot of talking in Washington.
Yes.
And I think they like to listen to themselves talking later on the news.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you might be onto something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep an eye on it. That's what we know. So this is my PowerPoint that I put together. So we've got some really fun pictures on this PowerPoint. So the top left is one of KJ's kiddos painting her parking spot, and those I don't know if you've looked at those, but while you're here tonight, those are really cool. You should go look at them. And we've, I toured around and had some back-to-school fun, torturing kids at Mark Twain for a minute, and the kids were so cute that day. And then that's a barbecue from the high school on one of their opening days back, where I think your admin staff cooked for everyone, right? Mr. Traeger, got the Traeger out. It's rough to put Traeger on the Traeger. I wanted to talk to you for a few minutes about our Robert Frost property discussion. And this, there's an active link in this PowerPoint that's on board book tonight. So our transaction was terminated by the buyer. It was submitted, the termination was submitted during the due diligence process. So, and we talked about this when that pending sale came in. Owen was worried about this the whole time, and he knows a lot about that. So I'm kind of not totally surprised, but here we are. The buyer requested that the city participate in the MURL program, which is a low-income housing program, and the city declined. And so if you click on that link, you can go right into that information about the MURL program. Moving forward, so when we put this property up for sale, and when we put it pending and took the offer in, we were in a dramatically different financial situation. The listing has technically expired, so we do not have an active listing on the property right now. The listing agent recommended that we extend the listing and put it at a new price of $3 million, but I'm not sure that's the way we should proceed. We could hold off and retain this property for future development, or sell at a later date if necessary. Real estate trends are upward in our area, although you know how real estate is, it goes up and down. So there's always market adjustments. And I think we're seeing a slight market adjustment right now with the higher interest rates that have been on tap for a while. So I just wanted you to have that information. I would recommend, and we can take a vote on this at the next meeting, but in my opinion, I would hold that property and not sell it now that you don't have to. I think it's a good location if we need to build another building. And it will probably, if you hold it, it probably will only go up in value, would be my guess, over time.
But we can't be speculative, but
We can't, no. I mean, there's no guarantees,
Yeah.
right? The market could go, completely south, and then you wouldn't have that. Yeah, so.
but the intention was for years that that'd be a future site for new buildings.
It's a big site, it's like 14 acres, so it's larger than any other property holding we have in the district. We have one other piece on James Street, just down by the baseball field, and that one is considerably smaller. So this is the only one that's probably big enough for a large size secondary building like that.
Yeah. It probably wouldn't be prudent now. We've gone through the petition, we've got it petitioned, right?
Yeah, it's all set up.
So that's all
Yep,
taken
that's all
care
done.
of, so we don't have to go through that again. So that's done. And
What's our tax implication to hold on to it? Like, are we getting tagged property taxes and school taxes on it?
Well, our property tax hit is lower than, I mean, it's in a school, it's
It's-
zoned for school,
Yeah, so it's negligible.
Yeah. I could tell you, I don't know what it is
Yeah.
exactly, but.
How long did it take to find a buyer?
The buyer was pretty quick, when I came on board.
Okay.
So it didn't take a long time to find a buyer. The property does have some complications. It's got some wetlands areas, and not all of it is, probably buildable. If you're doing a subdivision, you would probably have some areas that have, drainage things that need to be attended to. Any other questions on that? Okay. Just some more pictures of back to school. So this was a really fun moment. And we decided that it would be really great if the staff could hear from a student that had been impacted by our staff. And so we invited Liberty Berry in to visit with us, and she gave a speech at back to school breakfast. And that was really a powerful moment for staff. It was really a beautiful speech, and she talked about, look, they're all shaking their heads, there was not a dry eye in the house pretty much, and everyone gave her a standing ovation at the end. She did an amazing job. And it just was a really great way to start the year with, I mean, I could stand up there and talk all day, but it's not meaningful like that.
Hey, Kim,
Yeah.
was that the same young lady that spoke at graduation?
It was, and I was so moved by her graduation speech that I reached out to the high school team and I said, hey, who was that gal that spoke at graduation? It was so, I couldn't remember her name at
So
that point. And
I had heard from people, same response that they got, that was powerful.
yeah, it
Great,
was.
great decision, Kim.
Thanks. Yeah, she did a great job. Oh, I don't know. We could have. I think it was recorded. Yeah. So, if anyone wants to see her speech, I can send you the verbal, written version, and not verbal. Send you the written version. It's really beautiful. And she's just an eloquent speaker. She's an amazingly polished person for her age. So I was really impressed with that.
Yeah, it was good.
Here's our group. So we had a full house that day. And that's the standing ovation for her speech. And then more sidewalk painting or parking spot painting and some other littles from different buildings. And then the seismic project at Silvercrest is completely done, and it was completely on time, and it was under budget.
Well, two things you don't hear often.
That's gonna make me cry.
That was an interesting thing because when I first came on board, ODE, they emailed me the date. I think it was like the first day I was here and said, "Hey, what are you doing with this?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And they were kind of like hesitant because of our financial situation and did we have enough contingency to manage the project in case it had problems? And it did have a couple of problems. And Jeff is going to go through it with you like at the next board meeting. He's going to give you a full recap and show you all the different things that they did. But like there were no footings in that building, and so we had to do some concrete work before we could even start the rest of the project. And they still right on time, and the gal that ran it did such a great job. And there was a tree damaged when they remodeled this building, and she actually brought a tree out and planted it there for us so that it would grow. And so I thought it's a really cool project. It's really nice for the kids. Like the space is really beautiful inside. If I had to do it again, I have a couple things I would have added if I had more money. But we didn't know if we had any more. We didn't know if the money part would be okay or not. So it probably needed one more window, I think, in my opinion. But it's still a great building, and they're getting ready to move stuff in there. So, they already have. It's already fully up and running. So, and Jeff will give you the full rundown next time. Any questions on that?
Not on that, but I came to the kickoff party, or whatever you want to call it, and I thought it was really good. The atmosphere was really good. I, of course, talked to a lot of staff and teachers that were here that I've known for years, and the attitude has already changed.
Yeah.
And the optimism, as you can see it and you can feel it, and I was very impressed. I was impressed with the young lady. I was impressed with how excited the principal of the high school was, standing in front with the microphone announcing everybody coming. I thought it was very well done, and you could feel the difference in the hope and mentality of everybody, and that's where it starts. This is the start of the year. We know we're going to have some little bumps and humps as we go along, but as long as we maintain that attitude, I think we're going to get through it as a whole. So
Yeah.
Nice job, everybody that was involved, and I know there's a lot of people that were involved in organizing something of this size, and so it was a nice job. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to
Thanks
have.
for inviting us.
Yeah, it's great to have staff back. Like, it's really exciting to see them do their work. And I know they've got some challenges ahead of them. I mean, like, we've added 2 different curriculum products without a curriculum director, which has been a whole nother story all on its own. And they're being very patient about getting those programs up and running. And, you know, doing a lot of training, a lot of things. I will say, I do think that we should have, we're missing the early release time. So when we're talking about how to get DIBELS training done, like DIBELS would have been done during early release. And so we're missing that early release time now that we're deep into the year a little bit and talking to teachers. And, you know, sometimes you have to adjust things, and we adjusted that to get those longer stretches of training for teachers. But that we're also really missing that time to talk about data, to talk about grouping, to talk. So I think at some point in the future we'll wanna hit that again. Yeah, John?
Since you brought it up, I'm trying to remember why that changed. Again, the early release time.
Yeah, we had it, their contract reads that, you know, they have either 3 full days of training, or they could have the early release, you know, 1 day a week. And we were trying to do these big blocks of training. So for instance, like for 95% teachers were in here all day. They were in here for 6 hours. And so when you do that early release, you don't have those big chunks of time like that. And so we needed them to do the training. And quite frankly, like, you know, our teachers haven't had training on iReady. They've been doing the iReady math system for years, and they haven't had much training on it. You know, and so we're trying to give them the right training. Like, you know, Katie sat in training all day for 95%. And, you know, and continued training when they have questions and when they need things. And the early release system didn't really give us what we needed for professional development. But I think it's something we're going to have to talk about if we can figure out the minutes part, because teachers are already saying, Kim, we missed that time. And I'm like, yep, I knew you would, but it's just hard to get it all into the schedule and meet the minutes. You know, ODE has minutes requirements that we have to meet.
And that gets decided when we're building the school calendar, or is that union negotiation? How does that work?
Yeah, we do the calendar. Tony did it with the union. I mean, like, we do it in collaboration with the union. The union was on board. They knew we were doing it that way. But, you know, as you go along, it's good to collect feedback from people. And I've already heard from a couple people that we probably, you know, we may adjust back to that next year, but it would be helpful if we had a couple days to do shorter periods of time for data review, PLC, smaller blocks of training, like, you know, like training IAs on how to give DIBELS to students, different things like that.
Classic case, we need both, you know.
We do,
and,
yeah.
And then not to take away from student time, because they need that too. In fact,
They do.
I mean, Oregon's notorious for we got the shortest student time in the nation, just about.
Yeah.
And
We're like
it's,
49,
and
I
it's
think.
not surprising sometimes with a score situation that we don't want to. And then so if we have the student time, and then we have it all bottom line money.
Yeah, we were just talking about that, like Sarah Pope from Stanford Children, she did an interview on the news recently, and that was really interesting. I was watching her, and she was talking about like how to move early literacy forward and how to make sure all of our kids can read by 3rd grade. And she goes, well, we have 3 problems. She goes, one of them, our school year isn't long enough. Like, if you go to school in Washington, you get a whole year of extra instruction over Oregon, just because of the minutes that they have their students go to school. And then, you know, for years we have been kind of all over the place with literacy focus. And now we're kind of focused, we're getting honed in, and we're getting those systems in place. But I'd say that's a relatively new thing within the last 5 years. And then the other thing that really impacts student achievement and reading is coming to school. I need you guys to come to school. I need parents to send their kids to school. We really need that. And so we're going to hit that attendance part pretty hard this year. So. And I think that's pretty much it for that part of my.
All right. Tom, financial and enrollment.
We'll be covering a couple slides on enrollment, which is my new favorite subject, and then covering
Is that real?
finance.
They are tied together.
As a financial person, I'm not used to things changing hourly as they are currently for enrollment.
Literally hourly.
Without having,
It's a stock market, Tom.
new territory for me emotionally, so I appreciate your patience as I journey into it. But here is a snapshot of enrollment at the beginning of this school year. Just a couple things kind of to note from this snapshot. Last year at this time, we were kind of at 36, 38, so about 10 more than this. So that this snapshot, we were at 3628. We ended last year at 3606. So I hope that helps give kind of some context. But there's your snapshot of the enrollment, and again, changed dramatically today, I believe, is what Heidi had let us know.
Yeah, 3644 today.
So just up and down, and people are still enrolling.
So people showed up today.
Yes.
I think we've gotten kindergarten enrollments
Yeah.
even today. So.
Yeah.
Oops, I forgot to register my child.
And then another reminder, just to the financial lens, which is important. I think we assumed for this fiscal year in the budget, 3550 for
Yeah, is what we budgeted on.
what we budget for. Again, always budget conservatively and be happily surprised. So there's that slide. The next slide is kind of just all the change in the last 30 days. Obviously, kindergarten had a big surge there at the beginning of August. And then at the very end, people were probably like, oh no, it's coming up, I got to enroll. So, and then you had some drops in different areas. Total change of about 3 or 4%, 116 students in that period of time. Any questions on enrollment?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So, couple first about the new format. I see that we've added 2 categories that didn't exist before, like the hybrid and Sequoia. Now, for me to keep tracking my head, help myself track this stuff, the high school now doesn't seem to have. We were adding, I think, functional skills kids from the middle school to the high school. Those are removed now. Is that part of? Where are they now? If they're, because we were doing it by building, weren't we?
The functional skills kids?
Well, we have some of the middle school kids were coming to the high school.
Yeah.
And we were starting to categorize that because we had lists for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that were here at the high school. Now I have 0. So I'm kind of curious where they went. The other would be it's good to see Sequoia's numbers because I've never really known where they were at. Were they included in the high school numbers before? And when we did enrollment? Because right now we're down 66 kids from last spring in the high school. And to me, that's that scares me. Like, why are we losing 66 kids? But I'm just trying to figure out how it could just be a formatting thing where we're moving those kids around to different spots. Does that make sense?
Yes, sometimes the Sequoia and the hybrid kids are mixed in with the high school because Sequoia and the hybrid are both programs of the high school.
Okay.
But we split them out for you because you all were curious about how many kids were in the hybrid.
No, that's fine. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. I love it. If that's because now we've gained 20.
They don't have their own program number.
Okay.
So, like in the state of Oregon, when you're reporting to ODE, like we have a district number, it's 2138, I think. And so, they show up as graduates, like they're under Silverton High School. They don't have their own program number. Like each building in the district has its own number, but Sequoia and the hybrid do not. They show up underneath the high school.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. And then as far as hybrid, how many of these are new catches? Or I'm just curious, because we remember they were disenrolled that have re-enrolled.
Last time I talked to Jen, there were 13 that were new. But I'd have to ask her because that was when there were only 30 some kids and now there's more. So there's 44. That's a Jen Hanning question.
And I guess, my last one would be, I'm assuming, I mean, I know it's changing every day, but 10-day drop is gonna pop up here sometime next week, right? Around probably Tuesday, Wednesday next week?
Wednesday for most
Do we
kids.
have an idea? How does this normally work? Traditionally?
So last year we lost about 50 kids on the 10-day drop. And so this number, so we're at 3644, which is actually higher than the same time this year, last year. Same, well, that didn't make sense.
It changes out.
It's higher than last year, so, we should be at least 10 kids higher than last year, even if we dump 50 on the 10-day drop. But I will give the caveat that Heidi Eberly said she's never seen erratic attendance like this at the beginning of the school year, and she thinks it's because Labor Day was kind of early, and some people didn't account for that with vacation. She thinks that some of our kids were still on vacation.
It's true.
It's true, okay, so you guys are
And
confirming.
kids get added today.
Okay, so yeah, so we've got some kids that were out of the country and out of the state, so, and we did, and admittedly so, Labor Day was very early this year, so I think that has an impact on it, but we are higher than last year. I just want to be clear about that.
Yeah, it is. And thank you for clearing up those numbers, because actually, when I would look at them and add them to it, that means the high school's doing much better than it was doing last year, so that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, and I'll just, last thing on enrollment, why this is important to me. Phil was asking us to come up with board goals, and I've really struggled to kind of come up with any. But enrollment isn't, for some reason, it just sticks in my head. If we have a place that people want to come,
Absolutely.
and so, like, that's why I'm watching this a lot, and it's really encouraging to see numbers coming back. So, thank you.
So we're one of the few districts that actually has that scenario right now. So a lot of the districts that were down in enrollment are not seeing a rebound right now. And so we should feel very blessed that we are seeing some students return to the district. But having enrollment as your goal, the goal should be centered around culture and climate.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah, and making this a welcoming, inclusive
Welcoming
environment
place.
where all kids feel welcome, and that's what we're really trying to create here is an environment where we love kids, we take good care of them, we give them the best education possible, and we have highly exceptional staff.
Will be the why, right? Like, why are people
Yeah.
leaving? Why are people wanting to come? The numbers to me are just numbers. The why behind it is what I'm more interested in, and you just alluded to that.
Well, and I don't know that why people left, I don't know that that has anything really to do with our educational system. It might have something to do with political climate. It
I'm
might
sure it
not
has
be.
part of it.
It might
It is
not
part
be
of it.
any one thing that we did. It might just be part of the political climate. And, we've talked a lot this year about governing from the middle and making sure that, we are not just serving one population or the other, but we're bringing all people into the middle to serve kids. It's not responsible to govern from one side or the other. It's responsible to come into the middle and meet people in the middle.
I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it in case I don't. The kindergarten so high up from where Roundup is that fairly typical though, from year in and year out in a district to see that kind of a jump? We had the start count of 169 and now we got 231.
Yeah, it is.
And so I
it
assume
is-
that was based on Roundup, that 169.
No, the 169 Roundup, there were only like 40 kids in Roundup.
Mhm.
It wasn't a huge number. Though I will say that Roundup was really helpful to those 40 kids. And we talked about doing some type of kindergarten Roundup with all our kids next year if we could pull it off, if we had enough staff that wanted to do it. But I think that it's just, people just trickled in and enrolled them. And sometimes they're in the system, but they're not finalized. So getting your registration materials finalized. So like if you have one piece of paper that you need to bring into Robert Frost, get that in there. That helps us with staffing levels. Like, the faster you get through the registration process and the faster we get kids into the system. I mean, these are only kids that are fully through the system.
Right.
So there's probably still some trickling kids sitting there waiting to filter in, I would imagine, still.
Okay, Tom, give it back to you.
Sorry, Tom.
We hijacked
Back to
it.
finance.
Sorry, Tom.
So just a really quick slide, FY '25 has kind of come to an end, and we're now in the middle of probably 2 or 3 weeks of sending all our files over to the auditor to prepare for the auditor visit and report. But last year's revenues, we ended at 100.1%. And I apologize, Daniel, my slide has 14%, not 0 on that one cell, but that's what you want to see. You want to see your actual revenues a little bit higher than what you budgeted. So 52.6 million there. On the next slide is the end of the year expenditures, broken of course into two different ways, same numbers. Top is by category, which is again kind of how we often speak and understand expenses. Bottom is by function, which is how the board appropriates and authorizes and adopts the budget. And that's 95.5, and that is very, very normal for all public municipalities, local districts. You're going to normally see 95, 96% of your budget. You have vacancies, you've got empty positions, and all that kind of creates room. And you normally don't spend 100% of what you put in the budget for a lot of different categories. It ends up being less. You have that cushion. So that's 51.179. So on the next slide is just a really simple way of looking at that. 52.6 million in revenue, 51.179 expenditures. That gives you kind of an end of year net of plus 1.4 million. We budgeted a beginning fund balance of 1 million. Our actual beginning fund balance was 1.685. So you add that 1.4 to that 1.685. And I'll just pause for a minute for dramatic effect. That gives us an ending fund balance of 3.1 million, which again is 3 times higher than the original budgeted
Wonderful.
fund balance.
So
That's
good.
great news.
I want to give a quick update for this year, which is really hard to do because the year really hasn't started. In July, we spent 2% of our budget. We just don't have people here yet, so we're not really hitting expenses. So there's no real sense in me doing a projection until next month, where I can then do the normal report line by line and kind of give you a first glance of this year. But I will say real quick, revenues are slightly higher than the same point last year in terms of the budget, and expenditures are slightly less in terms of percentage. So that's looking great. Does it mean a lot? It's a little too early for it to actually have the weight or anything like that. And then I want to add on to what I talked about in our wonderful budget boot camp, which is the cost of fringe. And I want to show kind of a 5-year view. This is not perfect. And this is also an almost impossible subject to discuss. Somebody asks you, if you're the CFO, what is the cost of fringe? You almost have to say, do you have 4 or 5 hours to get coffee? And I will talk to you about it. That's because you can look at fringe a whole bunch of different ways. You can look at it in terms of what is the percentage of the budget, what is the actual dollars, or the actual dollars per FTE. Fringe is also divided by variable costs and fixed costs. And so it's different for somebody making 40,000 versus 80,000 versus 100,000. All those are wide, open, different interpretations of the same thing. So one way to look at it is just in terms of our total wages and salaries, what percentage are we spending in benefits? And you can see it's really jumped significantly. You're down around 60% FY23, and we're budgeting 70%, and it's likely going to be higher than that because we're not going to spend all our budget, which then lowers the amount for salaries and benefits, and that 70% is going to go up a little bit. So that's also really significant if you look at the next slide, which is kind of a real world example. The top part in blue are our benefits that are variable, in other words, percentage. The green is the monthly contribution towards health and benefits, health and welfare benefits. So the example here is somebody making 80,000. I just picked a number at random. If you take that 80,000 salary and then put it into that formula above, both the variable and that fixed cost per month, last year that person would have been 59.6% going to benefits. This year it's going to be 68.1. Well, that's 8 percentage points, but that's not necessarily 8% increase, of course. And you look at the actual dollars there for what we're going to have to spend on benefits, it's 47.6 to 54.5. That's an increase of 14.38%. Again, going back to our conversations about revenues, general fund revenue, right now the current average is about 4.3 or so increase per year. Here again is a great example of a large area of expense that's way above where the general fund is growing in terms of revenues.
Hey, Tom,
Yeah.
so I understand this. So as your example of an $80,000,
Yeah.
that you gotta imagine they've been here a long time to get 80,000, but you're saying the real cost would be about $127,000?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And we're
And if
gonna-
that person were making 45,000, for example, their fringe rate would be 100%. And if they were making 125,000, their fringe rate would be closer to 50%.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that combination of the fixed cost with that percentage cost and how that works.
I have a question regarding the PERS, because I know there's different tiers, and I don't quite, I actually very little understand all the differences between, I know there are different levels, and there's different. does that influence our percentage of expenditure as our teachers' population is moving through the time period? I would assume we have less and less, if any at all, of the tier one and employees and so on. So how does that affect these percentage? Because that's obviously
For us,
the biggest.
it's a higher impact.
Yeah.
Because every employer, well, all the schools are kind of pooled together, you know, for risk, it helps offset the risk, but outside of K through 12s, every public employer in the state of Oregon is kind of looked either to its own group or individually by the actuary in terms of what their rates need to be based upon future benefits they have to pay out. So there's usually a different rate for that employer for tier 1, tier 2, and for what people call tier 3 OPSERV. So our rate there, 24.5%, which is last year, going up to 32.47%, that really includes two main things. One is your core rate that we have to pay as an employer for that person. So for OPSERV, it's tripled, I think, for next year. So it was at like 4% or something, is going up to 12, so that has a big impact there. The rest is everything that we're paying for our pension bonds, which helped pay down early that unfunded actuarial liability, all of those commitments that we are going to have to pay to PERS as part of our benefits from PERS. But by paying it early, we still save a little bit. So without having done those pension bonds, instead of, for example, last year 24.5, it would have been like 26, and that actually adds up. You actually save potentially millions of dollars doing that ahead of time. So without those pension bonds, you would see a rate a little bit higher than even this. So that's the two main parts of our PERS rate.
I've got one more.
And if you see in the news about, you know, PERS costs hurting, punishing employers, this is kind of a great example in terms of those. Yeah.
My dad's an accountant, and he was talking to me about this Oregon Department of Transportation payroll tax, possible increase. Would that affect us, public schools? If that bill passes?
What kind of taxes, sorry?
I believe there is an increase to payroll taxes for this, like, Department of Transportation bill they're trying to put through.
In the special session.
For all
Just-
public
Special
employees?
session, no doubt.
For all employees.
Well, then potentially, yes, that would be.
Doubling
that could be
statewide
that.
transit also from
Yeah.
point 1 to point 2.
Yeah, that's a problem.
I'm looking
Gas
real
tax
quick
goes up.
here. Yeah, so I mean, are there any carve-outs, I guess, for public schools versus the private sector when it comes to these bills, do you know? Because that's another one, like you're talking about, I mean, I'm scared about it, and I only have like 5 employees, you guys have 400.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I don't know about that, but it's very similar to unfunded mandates. At any time, they could just pass a House bill or Senate bill that says, you know, everybody's going to do the following. You have to do it, whether it's in your budget or not.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Tom.
Sure.
And Derek, I believe Derek had a question for Tom online,
Oh,
I think. Is he still?
Derek?
Hey, there it is.
Nope,
Sign
there he
for a
went.
second. Flash right by.
My question is that kind of breakdown that you had with the percentage of increase. My assumption would be that'd be something we want to take kind of a hard look at as we start moving into contract negotiations and forecasting out. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, forecasting out is definitely a must. Absolutely agree.
That's where when we do the forecasting, I think I mentioned it a few meetings ago, where you're always thinking about at least 5 years out or so because of the compounding effect of all these things. It's normal for school districts in Oregon to always, the adage is you're working on last year's budget while you're living this year's budget, while you're thinking about the next year's budget. You know, there are many states where actually you have to, as you get into negotiations, you have to actually publish a 5-year trend. And Oregon has not done that yet. But when I was in California, I had to do that. I would have to publish, you know, when we would call sunshine our proposals to show how that would affect things 5 years out. And then, of course, when it came time, like let's say I came to you with a tentative agreement, I would have to, for you and for the public, show how it compounds over 5 years. Now, I think most HR people who are worth their grain of salt are going to do that anyway. But I will share that that's something that not necessarily all unions are interested in seeing, because, you know, of course, when multiply things out over a compounded period, it will naturally show that there's less resources today than you think you might have, right? So there's always a little bit from state to state where you see the climate being one that, well, yeah, you do need to forecast out several years ahead, because, you know, a 1% change today really becomes more about 2.7 or so when you get to year 3 or 4, right? And when you then see that, multiply that by the factor that Tom mentions, which is that, you know, when you look at revenues going up 3 to 4%, yeah, that'll compound a little bit, right? But it's geometric increase when you're compounding then the expenses, which go up in that 3.4% on an opening a wider deficit or a wider gap. It's a lot more money. So that's where during negotiations, the HR and the business person are usually the best friends, and not meaning it in a bad way, but in that we have to be in sync.
Well, and I think that when you're talking about that ODOT bill, like it has a 6% tax for fuel. And so that could impact our contract with First Student when it's renewed. So that's something to keep in mind too. So we have to be mindful of all these different moving parts. As we move forward.
And I don't think any part of that 6% increase is going back to the schools.
It's 6 cents. Yeah, I think it goes to
Supposed to go to
ODOT.
roads.
It goes to road management.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Well, in theory.
Yeah, it's really to help offset one.
Is it lost revenue?
Because they're not paying, EVs are not paying tax, so their revenues have come down, so they're looking at different ways too.
They're selling less fuel.
So it's one to help, there's two big pieces that all that, those taxes are meant to cover. And one is, of course, just the amount of layoffs that they were anticipating having. And then two, they did some calculation that they still want to have some degree of money to be able to spend on fixing potholes. I really think though, for me looking at it, it's really more about trying to stave off politically the layoffs, which of course are voters, right? So that's a big part of it. So yes, it's something that we won't see. If anything, Kim's right. It has a trickle down effect that it could, you know, whenever you're charging more on goods or services that we naturally partake in this case it's a contracted service, it's going to hit us a little bit harder, right? And we have 2 years now on the First Student contract, so it'll be probably about this time next year that we would start needing to think about negotiating for First Students. So we'll have 1 year of this, whatever ends up being this tax. So it'll be another thing to think about.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. All right. School Resource Officer contract.
Yeah, so inside your packet, you have an updated school resource contract for 25-26. I will tell you that this contract has not been updated in 5 years. So I noticed that when I came on board, the most current copy we have is 2020. And so the previous amount that we paid for these services was about $90,000 plus overtime. But that is a old figure for what this employee actually costs the city of Silverton. And so there's an updated amount in here of $120,000 that the district would pay. And that's not quite as much. The city's giving us a little love on that because the actual cost for us should be about 136, but I didn't have that in my budget, and so they met me in the middle a little bit, which was really nice. So it's the same contract basically. It has a couple of changes within it. So Sean Algetz does this position for us, and I think she'll remain in that position. She's still working even though this contract isn't signed. And she used to be supervised by a couple different people at the police station, and we changed that so it would just be one person, because that's easier to just have one person to talk to if we're talking about schedules or overtime or whatever. And then we actually adjusted her start time a little bit, so we moved it back, wasn't it, KJ, a little bit? We wanted her to be here a little bit earlier to catch that morning rush when the kids came in, and she was coming in around 8, but some of the kids were beating her in here, so we moved her back to like 7:45. And so we adjusted her time period a little bit, which she was okay with. So it has a couple adjustments in that area.
I have just one question.
Yeah.
It talks here about overtime and so on, but it doesn't talk about, is the 120,000 based on the hourly? And then the overtime, where does the overtime kicks in? Is it when there's nighttime activities, there's?
They
Yeah.
should bill us on top of that 3/4 of a position.
Yeah, Tom's correct. They bill us for the overtime. So for instance, like when Sean works a football game on Friday night, that's not part of her normal
Prom.
hours. It's really important for her to be there. So, you know, that would be overtime that we would want her to do. So it's mostly like extracurricular activities. It's not daytime building overtime unless we had an issue. So, I mean, I could see her working overtime during the day if we had a really serious incident with a student here. So if we had a weapon or if we had drugs, anything, a sexual misconduct claim, like any of those types of things, she would help us process because she's law enforcement as well. So.
And the overtime, for example, for football, is this then, budget-wise, is this assigned to athletic department for these events? Is this assigned to the high school part? Or is this still out of the district?
This is out of the general
budget?
fund.
Okay.
Yeah, she's in general fund.
Okay.
She flexes,
a lot of times, like on last Friday, she'll come in late, knowing she has the football game.
Mhm.
So if it's, she always checks if it's possible, so that she doesn't do overtime.
yeah, she tries to accommodate us. I think the overtime was what, about $10,000 last year total?
Well, I looked up through the invoices last year. Many months it's like $400 or $600. So I mean, it's not a
Huge amount.
Okay.
No.
Just asking for the
Yeah.
understanding of the better budget. I'm still in boot camp.
The budget boot camp. Getting all these contracts squared away was really important for the district.
Yeah.
So just making sure they're all current, because we don't, you know, if the city's providing that service for us, we want to make sure that we're compensating them for that, even though they knocked a little bit off to try and help me with my budget debacle where I didn't budget enough. But I had no way of knowing really what that amount would have been when I built the budget, so that happened later in the year. And then we will have this, the city's going to look at this on the 17th, so when we meet for our work session next time, we would have you guys vote and ratify this contract.
Okay.
I've only got one thing on this, and it's just because of my concerns before. What happens if she's not here?
There is a section in there, they're supposed to provide us somebody if she's not available.
I've been trying to find it.
Yeah, it's kind of near the back, Josh.
Okay, because, you know, looks like we're paying almost a salary, almost, and no one, like, it's the safety of our school. If she's not here, then somebody else needs to be here.
Yeah, correct, yes. And it does say that they will send, you know, someone else. But I can verify that for you if you'd like.
Okay.
Yeah, I have the same question, Kevin. I'll take another look at the contract. I didn't see it on my first peruse, but I'm sure it's potentially in there. But just that position gets backfilled, so I'll take another look at it.
Yeah, take a look at it, send any questions you have my way, because it's still, we can still adjust it, so it's not, this is just your first draft, your first read.
Has that been the practice? Like if she's sick or vacation, did somebody else has been here?
I think there's been some lapse in coverage when that has happened in the past.
She had a hand injury where she was out for a pretty long, extended period of time, and I would come here and there's just nobody here, and I didn't like it. I'm just being honest.
I can just share that having managed the contracts with the sheriff's office, we never like put the person's name. You're just contracting for a
Yeah.
position. So
Right.
you might have an understanding who that person is
Yeah.
most of the time, but if that person's out, it's up to that person you're contracting with to then fill it because you're filling for the generic position.
Yeah, same way with our nursing contract, like we have a certain amount of hours that they provide FTE. And so, I mean, they should have sent someone when she was out, they should have sent one.
And this has nothing, I love Officer Algis. I think she's awesome. I
She
just
is
saying,
amazing, yeah.
just want somebody here.
Yeah.
Well, then, yeah, so I would say then, especially based on the way Tom, which totally makes sense, what Tom just said, that be some clarification with the city that on the assigned officer, when they're not here, somebody's gonna be.
Yeah, and
I
somebody
mean,
should have.
we're paying for it.
Yeah, somebody should have, you know, inquired about that when that happened previously.
It's in Exhibit
Yeah,
A.
it's,
I'm losing my voice for some
Uh-oh.
odd reason. In Exhibit A, in the first section, it talks about, in the event of any SRO absence, the district and the city may collaboratively determine if the temporary placement of another SRO to a school is warranted.
Right.
So it says if, yeah. For
It
30
leaves it
or
a
more
little bit
days.
ambiguous then.
Well,
It's in
and
that
it says,
first
it goes
section.
on to talk about, you know, if the SRO is physically absent from
Yeah.
his or her school duties for 30 or more days, the city agrees to work with the district to provide a replacement. So we could change the 30 days to, that sounds like a long time to me, so maybe change that
Yeah.
to 10. And again, this is your first read, so when you go through it, I mean, nobody's really gone through it in like 5 years. I changed some things in it, like who she reports to, her time, because I wanted to change that before the school started, so that we would, you know, so that we would know what time she was supposed to be here. But yeah, I think you should go through and mark it up. You know, we could still make a few changes to it if we needed to.
Yeah, we're
I have a
paying
question.
for, oh,
Yeah, oh no, I have a question. Our charter schools are included in this. Do they then help pay for some of her since they're their
The
own?
charter schools help pay by giving us 20 or 21% of their, yeah, yeah.
and,
She's not stationed. She's never stationed there. So like when we had a swatting event down near Bethany last year, pretty quick over, but she reported just like she would to any other emergency. So when the SRO, if we have an emergency inside Silverton, like she does leave us if she needs to go report to some, like if there was a house fire or something, she would take off and desert us for a few minutes.
Does she also help with investigations at other schools too? I think she goes district-wide, right? So she's needed. That's where she goes.
Yes, district, and she even goes out to like Butte Creek, which is actually in Clackamas County.
Mhm.
It's not within her jurisdiction. Yeah, she helps at dance. She does all kinds. She's really great, you know.
You guys have some
She
rough
gets
dances.
around. She likes,
on the highway.
yeah, she likes the kids. She's passing out fidgets the other day. She's really funny. So.
And just to reiterate, the name of the officer is not in the contract.
right.
Yeah, right, yeah. We
That's
only
kind of
talked
just-
about it because she's our person. We know it.
So it sounds like important thing from on here is that we paying for 9.5 months, we get our 9.5 months.
Yeah, I'll make sure of it, yeah.
Okay. Robert Frost property, you mentioned that in your report. Did you have more to?
Nope, it's in here twice. So,
Okay.
yeah, that was just pretty much
Okay.
that. Unless you want to discuss it further, it could be a discussion item for you.
Yeah. Did we want to discuss it any further? Okay. Zone 7 vacancy update, and we've got it advertised out. 26th, I believe, is the
The
cutoff date.
26th is the deadline, and we will invite the candidates to the board meeting on the 13th. Give them a
October.
moment to introduce themselves, and you will discuss in public and vote on them in public.
Okay.
So
So-
currently I have 3 candidates.
Okay, so we've got 3
Three
candidates.
candidates so far. And so where was it advertised?
Facebook, Parent Square, and our website.
Okay. And so if the deadline is the 26th, will we get everybody's application on the 27th so we can start reviewing them?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
And last thing, so we do this in,
public.
Open session.
You discuss the candidates
discuss.
in open session, and you will
You could-
vote in front of
It's
them.
really awkward. I've done it before.
And now,
Super
it's
awkward.
just
So
like,
it's not even a secret ballot?
like,
it feels like budget committee.
it's the
It's
same
worse.
horrible procedure.
Wow. I hope
Um,
there's not 2 people I really like already. I have to pick.
Be all
Yeah.
conflicted. You could actually have questions for them too if you wanted to. So if you had, a small set of interview questions, you could ask them those
Yeah, I was gonna
questions.
say, important part there is we have same questions
Same. They have
for
to
each
be asked the
person,
same.
Yep.
just like a job
Just like a
interview.
regular job
Yeah.
interview.
I'm going to ask a question just in case it happens. What if they contact us to discuss it outside the meeting?
I think that would
Ahead
be
of time.
appropriate.
That would be inappropriate,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, I just
Yeah,
want
I
to
would
make
just
sure.
say,
like,
call Debbie, yeah.
yeah, if you run, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a small town. You run into somebody like, hey, I'm applying for the school board position. Don't talk to me.
Yep, run away.
That would give them an unfair disadvantage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions on that?
Anything else? Okay. Okay, superintendent evaluation process, Mr. Remote, Derek.
Yeah, no major updates on this. My proposal, as we discussed kind of on the April 11th meeting, is for us to utilize the OSBA and COSA evaluation process. I didn't get any significant feedback from any of my colleagues about any specific tweaks. So moving forward, unless we have different ideas tonight, would be to use those 8 standards. I did give some thought. We had mentioned potentially prioritizing, a few of those, and I think that would still be good for us to do. My suggestion would be that we prioritize effective financial management, that we prioritize visionary district leadership. I think that works right into the conversations we've had around strategic planning. And then something different that I've kind of been reflecting on is the culturally responsive instructional leadership and improvement, because there's a descriptor in there that specifically talks about students. I think we're at a place now, Kim is settled for the foreseeable future, and I think those are some things that she's already dug her teeth into. But I think, again, for the 6 of us, if we have some priority, just helps her focus, but that would be kind of my take, and then we utilize the timeline like we discussed last time.
Okay.
So Derek, we were wanting to, your recommendation is to make an emphasis of effective fiscal management, effective organizational management. What was the third one?
Sorry, the first one is effective financial management.
Yeah.
Second one is visionary district leadership. And then the third would be culturally responsive instructional leadership and improvement. We had the organizational leadership in there previously. I think Kim is doing a fantastic job on that. She's going to have to continue to do a fantastic job on that. But I think as we kind of are moving forward, I think we really need something that is student-centered, and all those obviously are important around student, but that was the only one that specifically talks about, systems, focus on student learning. And I think, again, kind of where we're at right now, trying to craft a vision for our district, I think those are ones, at least for me, that really kind of come to the forefront.
I like it.
Yeah, I agree with those. Okay, and then just to be clear, then tonight in action items, you'll want us to adopt this timeline and process, basically.
Correct.
That you've got laid out. Okay.
Correct.
And at the very back, Derek, the superintendent evaluation standards, I guess that's what threw me off. Do we want to put those top 3 as far as emphasis?
Yeah, what I'll do is, because that was carryover from last year, is I will update those and I will send them to Debbie so that way we can post it. I wasn't sure where we were going to land tonight, so I can get it posted so that way our public can see kind of what we prioritize.
Any input, Kim?
No, I think under that last goal that Derek's talking about, the instructional improvement, I think that's going to be difficult to track a little bit with some of the new things we're putting in, the 95% and the U-Fly and some of those things. I think those will have a positive impact on instruction. I hope so. And I think I want to hit attendance, so I probably would wrap attendance into that area. That's one of my goals, because we actually dropped a couple of points in attendance last year, and we have to get that back higher. So I think that's a priority for me. And then, just trying to get all these curricular systems in place. That's a lot of work when we don't have a curriculum director, and so. I just want to be really upfront about that. I mean, Heidi's been helping me, Debbie's been helping me, Elisa's been helping me, Tony. I mean, it's all hands on deck trying to get some of this stuff in. But they're complicated systems. Yes, Katie, she's got a brand new system. And, I worked all day on Labor Day, so, on Monday, Labor Day. So I just want you to know that those are not simple to put in, but I think they will have a big impact on student achievement. I'm not sure what that will be this year. But.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions or comments concerning the process or timeline?
No, thanks, Derek.
Yep. Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
good job, Derek.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Kim, thank you for your input as always.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to.
Okay, first reads. Anthony.
I have a question of procedure here. Are we legally required to read these again? Like, to go through? Like, I've received this on Friday or Thursday, whenever I've received those. I've reviewed them, we saw them, do we need to physically go through these things again? Or can we just say, anybody has questions or suggestions?
Yeah, so what's commonplace is on second reads and third reads, if
Yeah.
there's not any direct change. Actually, I'll take half a step back. Most public organizations, municipalities, and districts will only have two reads. You know, of course, there's always a third read if there's some substantive changes, but usually when I have the second and third read, usually unless there is something, oftentimes that'll go on consent. Some places actually will put first read on consent because it's just a notice that there's a policy, and then usually the office would get feedback, and then we would come at the second meeting and just say, here's the feedback we got, where now it's substantive enough where we're gonna call this the first read or not, or we move forward, right? So there are a few ways we can do this, and we're following the process that had been done in the year before. So it's interesting now with 3 of the 7 members new that maybe as part of a wrap up to this year, like board self-reflections and goals, that you might decide, is there a different way to streamline the policy process? I will tell you this, that if and whenever we come to a policy that has potential to be either a little controversial or whatnot, I will, or has a strong or heavy financial impact,
yeah.
I will definitely bring that as more of a discussion. Like for instance, tonight there's 2 policies that are that way. A bunch of the other ones, Daniel, I would say are really just pro forma technical.
Yeah.
And in those cases, what I can do is I can just mention, run through the policies, and I can mention highlight them, and then if you guys have questions, you can talk, because we do have, so you do know too, that for the board to know, and even the audience and the public to know, there are 2 board members who sit on the policy committee. And this last meeting, we had both board members, and they represented, in my opinion, they represented the board well. They asked very thorough questions.
Very detailed.
And I think that really helps the process, because it brings, I think it brings to you all that notion that, hey, people are really vetting these things.
No,
Well-
and here's the background of my question, okay? So I admire all the work that goes into that. I respect the work of the policy committee, including the 2 board members that are taking the time to do this, the staff, the legal people, I assume that there's probably teachers involved in that committee a little bit too, but all the people that have done that, I have an opportunity to read it. I don't assume that there is anything in there that's going to jump at me that hasn't been already questioned or discussed. As long as I'm offered the opportunity to ask a question, if I have one, then I'm comfortable trusting the work of the committee, and I trust that my fellow board members have taken the time to review this ahead of time. And we were talking about meetings that last too long at the work session, and you know, I think that's one way for us to trust the work of the people who do the work and not have to rehash it all over again after all the good work that you guys have put in.
Yeah, the previous practice when I was on before is we'd go through each policy by number and say, is there any comments?
Yeah.
If not, move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Not the next one.
And that's the way, that's actually the way we were working before. And we would take first reads, and first reads, we would just hit each one and allow for discussion, and that was where it was understood first reads. If we had input as a board on changes we wanted and everything, and we would do that, but we wouldn't read through each one each time. We'd just, we'd come to it and say, you know, like right now, the first one there, and do that. And then second and third reads would, and if there hadn't been, you know, the second read, if the changes got put in it that were supposed to have been put in it, if there was any, or if there wasn't any changes, whichever case. Second read just was on there, and only if somebody had discussion. Third reads were just part of the consent agenda.
I've never done a third read in any
And,
district I've worked
Well,
in.
it's
Our-
adop-
and our
third
policy-
one's just adoption, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just adoption, so it's just in the
It's just
convention, so it's just, the third read just part of the consent agenda. But, and most of the time, we never had much of anything on the second reads, because unless there had been substantial changes from the first read. And one thing too, that I'm not sure a lot of, if some of our board members may not know, and some of the general public may not know, with the exception of a few, ARs aren't, we don't adopt, as a board, we don't adopt those. That's just basically informational only, the ARs being brought to us. And that's just transparency. And so, so basically that's up to administration to make the ARs. There are a couple of ARs by policy that we do need to adopt, but I would have to go back and look through policy to see what those even
And I'll
are.
put in parentheses
Yeah,
required.
yeah, so, and, so anyway.
And I think coming in last year, I think along with the whole transparency process, similar to our challenges we have financially with the budget, part of this was all transparency. So that way, last year, we did get into a lot of deep review on some of the policies.
Right,
So probably a good thing, knowing where we were.
Yeah.
Right, to be able to help also
Right.
demonstrate that transparency to the public,
right.
that we are on top of this stuff. But you are right that generally speaking, we'll run through the list of policies. I'll mention I can just mention a brief topical area of the policy and ask if you have questions on them. It would be an opportunity too, when I mention them, if one of the board members who are on the committee wanted to make a particular point or something that
Right.
just stood out to them.
Absolutely.
They could definitely do that, but now tonight, for instance, there are two of those policies that are very
Right.
important, but the rest of them were very much pro forma. So-
You know,
So with your permission, Chair Weezer, I'll just go ahead and start running through them.
please do.
Okay, well, the first policy, IGBA-B, this is special education, and it was just an update on the August packet that we got from OSBA to what we had talked about several months ago, was basically in special ed, there's that rule with the new law that says that when parents request information, you have to give it to them within 10 days. Really, the only change you would see on it is really part of the footnote, where it's just picking up what was done before. So that was pretty technical, and I don't think Director Larson, you really had anything more.
No.
you want to say on that? So that's that. Any questions? Okay. The next two are the ones that are substantive. So the first one, IIA, is instructional materials policy. This one was affectionately or not affectionately, depending on where you were, known as the book ban policy in the late winter, early spring of last year. And this is the policy that is very specific to the protocol used by boards and districts in adopting everything from core materials to supplemental instructional materials and into library materials, which could either be school-wide or classroom libraries. The brief context on it was that the policy committee had spent a few meetings running through this. Probably I'm going to think it was starting around January, February. By the time we got to March or so, we were about ready to bring it forward. But then the legislature had, in the Senate bill, had changed the requirements. And the big change was that it did significantly limit the authority of the board with regards to many types of instructional materials. Because of that, we did not bring it forward in that iteration of it, but we wanted to review it again in light of that new law. So what you have here is that you have a policy, that the policy itself just basically spells out the real overall broad notions about what materials are. And then you have a series of administrative regulations, which are really the procedures for implementing the policy. What I think is most important to mention on the instructional material policy is really what the big two key changes were in the law that passed. The first big change is that by statute now, whether it's a board member who's making the decision or boards or the superintendent or a curriculum person, basically instructional material cannot be decided upon or decided to either keep for a particular reason or to not keep or to prohibit for a particular reason based on what we often see as protected classes. So in a way, it's bringing what some of us affectionately know as equal protection and due process provisions to instructional materials. So it basically says that none of us here can remove a book or an instructional material, video, say, just because we don't agree with it if it has a relation to a racial category, an ethnic category, sexual category. And Oregon, as you know, as you probably know, has a more expansive list than even the federal government does. We have a few categories that are on there that in Oregon's protections that are beyond that. So that was the first piece to it. The second piece to the big change in the law is that where before the board would more naturally have an automatic either an appeal or review process of many of the materials. Now the way the law is written is that the only area where the board has final appeal process on is core materials. Because the law's been very clear that the school boards get to set what is actually considered the core curriculum. So that would be, think of it basically as your text, okay? So that process changed in here because before when we were the March iteration of this, the appeal process to reviewing any type of materials or requests would, they could almost come from anybody and they would work their way up. So you know, anybody, a parent, a staff member, even a community member could come to principal, and I'll say like, I use Palmer because he's the principal who's on the committee, for instance. So they can come to Palmer and say, you know, I don't appreciate this book. I want you guys to review it. And then what we had put in place was a process whereby the principal would have the opportunity working, if it was, let's say, a classroom that's library material, working with the staff member, and then they would articulate the rationale for it. They would listen. If the individual still had a concern after that, there would be a formal declaration by the principal. The person could appeal to the superintendent. The committee, policy committee at that point was very clear that they believed that, and they came to understand that really the responsibility fell upon the superintendent because the superintendent was going to set what the procedures were for the review committee. The review committee would have 5 people, and they would look at the complete, what I would call the record of how that material was selected, what the challenges were to it and whatnot. And then the superintendent would issue a finding. And then there was the opportunity then if a person really didn't like that, in some case they could bring it to the board. Now, it was agreed upon by the policy committee and recommended though that when it did come to the board in that case, it was really a review for procedural. So did the superintendent then follow the correct procedures in having this committee look at the work? Or did the superintendent make clear error in that? Now, we try to keep that very much similar throughout because the original OSBA policies had 4 different processes for whether it was a core, supplemental, library, or classroom library and school library. We had wanted to narrow it down to one process. Okay, so we had done that. Where the second change to the law had the impact, really, it really wasn't from that first part necessarily about that, you know, you're not going to remove a book or a material based on those protected classes. It really was about this notion of who could bring a complaint and request review. So now under the law, the only area where the board could either as an individual board member or the board itself could have a final review process would be with core materials. The second part of that provision was is it does limit who could bring the request. Remember I mentioned before how any community member could bring a request? Mm-hmm. Now for all those other types of materials, it has to be either a parent, a staff member, and no more longer can it be just what they would consider a disinterested community member. Okay, now we could argue whether disinterested, if you're in the community, I always think you have a degree of interest, but the way the law was written is that it would have to be a parent or a staff member basically would be the groups who can bring that request forward. So we had to go back then and retweak the policy that in ARs that we had developed 4 or 5 months ago to align with that. So what it made me do is basically I went through, and what you'll see, which is highlighted in red, because, and it's important for me to note that the AR particularly was really, I would say a lot of it is my crafting, because I had to take 4 ARs and put them into one, of course with the guidance from the policy committee. So where you see all the reds, it really is those 2 big changes. One, that we need to spell out that we're not going to, violate this law in making those decisions. And 2, I had to be very kind of crafty, and like for instance, in one of the AR, I specifically mentioned that the board may review with core materials only, and then requests from, and then for the other types of materials, it could be a staff member or a parent of a student. So I had to do some of that kind of tweaking in the language. But the bottom line is, with all these materials and that, is that what you have in front of you, you have a policy which is very general, which basically restates the law. You have one AR that basically provides definition to what each of those types of materials are. Then you have one AR, which is the procedure that the superintendent is to implement to reviewing those materials. And that was the one we spent most of our time talking about. Then you have another AR, which is basically the request form. That request form, by the way, didn't really change at all from the one we had in March versus what was today. And then the last AR didn't change much either. And that last AR was the procedure that the board can use to independently adopt curriculum. Right now, you're probably used to hearing that curriculum needs to be adopted from the state adopted list, right? You probably hear that a lot, right? Well, under the law, Oregon law, and the new law didn't change this at all, is that if the board has an established process, the board can adopt a curriculum that's not under the state approved list, so long as it follows that specific procedure. That's what that last AR is. It basically means you as a board are going to take feedback and input. Let's say it's the math curriculum, right? You're going to take all that input, you have it on the record, it's a very public process, and then you can vote to do that. So that's what the instructional materials policy is. It was a lot of discussion over several months that happened. Wally, I know you've only been in the last month or 2 with the policy committee, but Josh and for a while Derek were on. I don't know if any of you want to mention anything about the discussions, but basically that's what that policy is.
I guess the only thing that I would say on this is a lot of it was just piggybacking off the administrators of what would work for them, for the ARs. Because we're not in the classroom. We don't know. Like there was a lot of, I remember Mulligan, when he was in there, saw the complaint form, like how many times somebody could file multiple complaints. It just bogged down the district if they just wanted to be a troll, catching things like that. Yeah, this was, for me, this is a tough one, just to see that, I understand you can have rogue boards, but diminishing a board's oversight or responsibility is frustrating. But it's the law, and we're gonna follow the law.
Yeah, I was disappointed to hear there's legislation that took control away from the board, but
So
it is what it is.
basically, if I'm understanding this very well, aside core curriculum, if a parent makes a complaint that there's material in the classroom that is way out there, that they still have a process, but it'll stop at Kim.
Yes.
That-
And you're right, Daniel. And what the committee had talked about is the committee understanding that the way that the board still does have a degree of control, but you know where your control is, right? You
Kim.
maintain your
Yeah.
contract with the
Yeah.
superintendent. Okay. That's where the accountability.
And that's something we did talk about in the policy group as well.
Yeah. So is that, to some extent, though, something that is public or that we are made aware of, that decision is being processed and what the outcome of the decision is?
Yeah, in the case of some of the core materials, because there is that automatic appeal, you'll
Yeah.
get that, okay?
Yeah.
In the other cases, what it really is, it's again, just part of your normal protocol that you have with your superintendent. So that's why I would always recommend, and I recommend this to any district and that I've ever worked with is that when you work with your superintendent at time of hire or time of evaluation or whatnot, you really establish good protocols about what you expect them to bring to you. Okay, because that's that's your opportunity to really control it. Because you could say, it's part of our normal communications that we understand, but just like the board's going to be transparent with you, Mr. and Ms. Superintendent, that the superintendent will at least provide, whether it's through a memo version or whatever. Yes, and I would say with materials, I mean, that's for you to negotiate and discuss with your superintendent.
Yeah, you could put that in your board operating agreement.
Yes, that's your operating
That's where I
agreement,
would
your
put it.
norms, some call them communication norms, whatever it may be. That's how I would
Because
recommend
obviously,
you do it.
this is potential for some very hot button, right, that we hope that we never have to cross or deal with, but.
We already dealt with it last year.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, we already had the hot button.
If I can chime in, just because it obviously was a hot topic last year, it's still a hot topic. We've had robust conversations. I guess the only question I have, it's kind of in our electronics policy piece, but it's specific to children and internet access. And I think some of the community or parents' concerns is not necessarily the relationships that may be displayed in particular, book or magazine, what have you. But I think it's the at what point does it become obscene? And we have that specific language in our internet piece. Granted, that's referencing a specific internet statute. So I think if there was going to be any change where showing compliance to the new law, but also compliance that, as a district, we're going to take a stand and not allow material that is obscene, doesn't, have redeeming value. Like there's obviously certain adult magazines that we would not want in our libraries. And so I think if there's any way to add a footnote or something along those lines specific to those statutes like we have in our electronics, which is in a second read tonight, that was the only little piece where I thought we can maybe tighten that up a little bit and show that we're being thoughtful with the new law and current laws on the board.
I would say the reason why I don't think you need that is because there's still at the federal level a strong understanding about, there's this phrase, and you kind of mentioned one of those words, does it have redeeming academic value, which is a federal standard. And that should be the standard that Kim would use in that, or even at the first level when the principal reviews it.
Mm-hmm.
There is that's been pretty well long established through jurisprudence through the last several decades, that there are some things that are patently obscene, and that if you can't articulate the redeeming instructional value to it, then it's not as much, then really you could argue that it's really not reviewable as part of this policy, because this policy is going on the assumption that the material does have some kind of academic value. I can always look, if you would like, I can try to look to see to what degree that might be, like even if it's a parenthetical or a footnote somewhere in there. I can take a look at that. I don't think, just my opinion would be, is I don't think I would find much guidance on that specifically, because I think that that's been jurisprudence that's been understood for a while. But I will definitely take a look.
But your words that understood and assume concern me. So if there's a way to put that specifically in there, I think it'd be a good idea.
Well, I think it also, I think there's a large onus on the principal to have input on what's put in the library in the first place. Yeah. I think that, having that conversation with whoever's in the media specialist role or in the librarian role about, does it contain obscene material, and is it offensive, and what is the educational value of it? I mean, you have to ask those questions when you're putting selections in your library. And once this policy is finalized and voted on, I actually have to go through the process in here on the one complaint we had from March, April, somewhere in there, that I didn't do because we didn't have a policy in place. So I've just kind of held it, it's just waiting. So once this is done, then I actually have to run through this process with that book, and I of course will keep you abreast of what happens.
What I'm pretty sure I could do is I could put a parenthetical in there that really mentions basically what Kim just said, which is that at the time of deciding what materials to go into, whether it's a class in the library or the library. I don't think I need to address core because there is the procedure for core that, you know, that the decision makers should be considering, you know, redeeming academic value and at what point materials become obscene.
Well, and you're not gonna have this problem with core textbook materials anyway.
You
That's
shouldn't.
not, you shouldn't. I haven't seen anything in those that, I mean, I was
No.
on the adoption committee with the.
Yeah, my concern is that there is a clear path for people who object and the ability to be voiced, right? And whether it's based on right or not, or whether it is, I think that's really important that there is a path.
And the one thing this
Yeah.
policy will never do is take away, because even though the policy limits for our process, the administrative
Yeah.
process, who can bring it forward, there ain't nothing in here that stops a community member from coming and sitting right there where those
Yeah.
fine folks are,
Okay.
and giving you the piece of their mind
Yeah.
about what you have. That's part of the, that's public discourse.
Right.
Well, we
No.
had several.
Well,
And that's really important.
They're paying
Yeah.
taxes, they
Yeah.
should have every opportunity to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we had several people come in and talk.
Mhm.
Okay.
I'd like one comment for Derek, because Derek, you did bring it up, and I did bring it up in the policy meeting as well. You directly referenced the electronic communication system that our kids have in the policy and some of the languages. I like you say, for consistency across policies for how we view certain things, particularly sexual content, and obscenity is a word that we used in that policy in our first read. The other one here, Kim, that I'm just worried about is all school library materials will be selected by a librarian or other designated employee. I don't think we've been doing that. We only have one librarian in the entire district.
Correct, yeah.
How many books have been brought into our schools that have not followed that?
Well, I mean, for example, I brought 3 books to Lisa Bledsoe the other day, and she evaluated them all for appropriateness. Now, I would not bring anything weird in here, but Lisa did look at them. She's like, yep, this one's okay.
But
Yeah.
she's not a librarian, she's the designated employee, correct?
She's a media specialist.
Okay,
yeah.
because Jackie is our only librarian. So how does that work? Because when they say other designated employee, are we just giving a lot of latitude for who gets to make that choice? That goes through the principal, and they get to designate who gets to do it?
The normal procedure would be, it would be the superintendent, who's the one district representative, can make the designation to the principal, who then, yes, as an administrator, the principal to make that designation. Which brings up another point, Josh, is with any of these policies, and what happens, and what usually, I mean, it usually does happen unless a policy is so simple, is that Kim's gonna have to, basically train the administrators on what this policy is. There will be training on this policy.
There
because
will be,
It's just
yeah.
complicated enough that we're gonna have to train that, and then part of it is gonna be, well, how are you making sure, consistency is the #1 rule to remember in any of this work. So the key thing in our training message to principals would be is how are you making sure there's a consistent protocol and process that you're using to make sure you're not being arbitrary and capricious in how you decide these things. That's your superintendent's responsibility.
Well, and I did a little research on this already. So I went and I actually asked Lisa Bledsoe what her budget was for this year for the high school, and she goes, what budget? I said, are you gonna purchase any books, Lisa? And she goes, I don't have any money that I know of. So like, the budget restriction at the high school, like, we're not ordering tons of things for this library right now. And then I went and talked to Jackie Renaud, and I talked to Jackie because Debbie and I have a room full of books at the district office, and we have all these fiction books that I have not read. And so I don't know how inappropriate they are, and I don't have time to figure it out. And so I took a stack of what was donated to Jackie, and I said, I need to know if we should put these in our library. So Jackie's like, okay, I'll take a look at them. So she's got a stack to look through. And so, like, you know, making sure that we dot all those I's and cross all those T's, that, you know, Jackie will play a large role in making sure that we understand what the parameters are. And then the other thing that happens, elementary libraries actually have more ability to put books inside the library, because what they do is they do a scholastic book fair, and they earn a bunch of money, right? But usually what they're purchasing is through the same organization. And so I think that the instance we had was kind of a one-off. I don't expect us to have a lot of problems, honestly. We are gonna review that one book the minute this policy is voted upon, which will probably be, this is a first read, so probably October. And so we'll put that team together for the first time and really, you know, we'll put a team together and look at it and see what we think. I mean, I know what I already think, but, you know, put the team together like the policy dictates and make sure we look at it thoroughly as educators. And does it have, I mean, my main purpose is, does it have educational value? And if it doesn't have educational value, then maybe it doesn't need to be on the shelf. And if it does have educational value, maybe it needs to stay. So, you know, you're just really evaluating each material that we get a complaint on, but I don't anticipate a lot of this.
All right.
Now for the other fun one.
Thank you for the the next policy, which is the other big one I have for you, is the cell phone policy. That's JFCEB. Boy, I don't know if we can add any more letters to these policies. Lawyers will find a way, right? This policy, of course, was basically written to follow the governor's executive order. Interestingly enough, what we found in reviewing the policy was that, you know, even aside from the governor's executive order, there is law on some of this. And it came to light when we looked at it. So what you have in front of you is you have a policy that basically implements the governor's executive order, and you can read through it. It's very much that. And then you have an administrative regulation, which basically is really just a form that can be used to request the exemption from the policy. Now, this brings to light, well, why is there this exemption? Because when you read the executive order, it's pretty clear in the sense that basically from bell to bell, no cell phone. The exception would be, which we might have to address at some point in our future here, is because there's understanding in the policy sector and the legal field is that when you have an open campus like this, we couldn't necessarily prevent a student from taking the phone going off campus, like when they go walk to McDonald's or something, which always reminds me I never go to lunch when it's I know I saw one of our board members and he made a smart idea, went through the drive-thru. That was foolish not to go inside, but in any event, what we find is that the current law actually had an exemption policy, so that way parents could come to the superintendent and say, you know what, I feel no matter what your policy is on electronic communications that I should be exempted. So even though the governor's executive order was pretty clear that it was to be bell to bell and that the only exceptions would be an IEP or Section 504 or a medical exception, which would be the best case scenario, the most common one that's easy to understand, because a lot of our kiddos with diabetes now type 1, they have the nice little free Libres or whatever it is that you do your cell phone with, right? That's a clear example, right? So when we reviewed this policy, there was this clause 3 in here which said that you could actually make an exemption request according to the AR. And people on the committee rightfully said, well, why is this in here now? Well, it's because the executive order from the governor didn't change the law, which allowed there to be an assessment. So what I did is I actually added, and that's where you see the change of the laws there, said, because the one thing the law says though, is the law says that you don't have to consider an exemption request if it doesn't have a good academic purpose to it. So I wanted to go back and add that to it. So that's why there's that little language that says exemption request for the use of personal electronic devices may only be considered for purposes that support academic activities or independent communication, which basically means the ability for the student to access the communication. Think of like assistive technology. So that's why that's in there, okay? Other than that, it pretty much follows the executive order. The one thing the committee had asked me to do was to make sure that whatever the non-compliance, so the disciplinary side of it, followed what we were thinking of doing at the school, particularly the high school, because that's where you're gonna see about probably 80 to 90% of the challenges of the issue. So we did that. The very next day, I went and asked them to do this, and this is how they would like to have this implemented. One, on the first non-compliance, temporarily confiscated. The student has to come and pick it up at the end of the day, and yes, the student or parent will be notified.
Thank
Okay?
you.
Second, non-compliance, again, it's confiscated. This time the student, parent, guardian is notified, and the parent must pick it up from the main office at the end of the school day. On the third instance and beyond, the device is confiscated, the parent or guardian will be notified, and the student is placed on a technology plan for at least 2 weeks, which basically means that device gets checked in and checked out at the office at the beginning of the day and the end of the school day. I also added language that, again, at the end of that section that basically states that further instances of noncompliance may also result in other discipline in accordance with policy JFC, which is basically the conduct code. Okay, so there is that provision. The only thing we can't do ultimately is, I think I shared this before, is this policy itself can't penalize instructional time. Okay, but if they tell Ms. Jorgensen over there when she asks for the cell phone, she says, "Forget you, Principal Jorgensen." Well, then that kiddo has violated not just this policy, but then insubordination in the comment, and they could be suspended. So that's what that is. The AR form is just the form that they would use to submit that.
So on the policy committee, there's a couple, KJ, I think you're here kind of our request for two reasons. How's it going? How's it going? What's it actually look like? Because when I was at the high school on Wednesday, I was like, oh. Now, I didn't see a lot of cell phones out. It was fantastic. But I did see a kid with an iPad on a lunch table just doing his own thing. And I'm like, this exemption form has me concerned in how it could create maybe jealousy amongst a student. Why does he get to use his iPad and I can't? I'm already hearing from my kiddo, who's a senior, that people are sneaking their cell phones in their clothes to go to the bathroom. Down their pants, in their bras. They're going to find a way. And then the last one, well, I'll let you start with that. How's it going with that?
Actually, Wednesday was the first day of school, so that was a rough day. I mean, as far as the cell phones go, it's actually going really well. I asked staff just to kind of share some of the highlights, and we really, we didn't allow cell phones in the class time. Last year, we were really put down on that. So it's really passing time and lunch that we were concerned about. And aside from the iPads you saw, we aren't seeing a major issue during those times. I mean, kid walked by today, funny story, kid walked by, Mr. Craig and I were talking, very deep conversation. The kid walked right by me, he had a little ear fitted, and two girls came over to me and they were like, they were like calling each other out. So, but some of the things the teacher shared is like the AG students have never been this noisy. They're just comfortable talking to each other. Lunchtime, we have groups of students playing cards, engaging with each other in person. Students are talking. Lunch actually feels like now kids are eating their lunch and on their board because they're not sitting on their phone wasting time. They're well, maybe lunch could be cut shorter. I'm not just joking. One of the things staff members shared, the biggest thing I've noticed with no cell phones is that students are having face-to-face conversations. When there's been downtime in class, they're finished with work and they're getting out homework for another class. Last Friday, a teacher reported that she had a good conversation with a student. She told her that her and her friend group have been actually socializing at lunch. Now the phones are put away. They went around the table and shared things they were grateful for. It felt meaningful, and she really enjoys this policy. Positive change in classroom, teachers reporting the quality of the work and their students are producing is stronger, and their students are more focused. I'm loving a no phones environment. It's making a difference. And just kind of a shout out, Coach Lieber, our football coach, collected every single football player's phone on the first day of school, and he told them they were going to be the example, get ahead of it, and so they all had to go into the weight room, turn their phone in, put a note on them with their name, and they didn't have one. And they survived. All of them survived. So I think we kind of gave it it's not a grace period, but I mean kind of hey, just a reminder, this last week and then this week we're starting to crack down a bit more, and kids are, there's a few that are going to say
Always
not
will
as
be.
nice as what Tony said. About just, their phone. The one part that we really have a hard time with is the I wish there was a way we could get away from really confiscating their phone, because that's where the battle starts. If you
Yeah.
take the phone, it's their property, and there's the battle versus like, we thought about all the things, and it's really hard to really enforce it without doing that. So maybe we'll get to something, but right now, that's kind of where we're at. We
Put
have these phone envelopes,
put
we're
it-
calling them,
yeah.
they're like, they're padded little,
Put them in a phone bag with
yeah,
a
put them
lock.
in their phone, they're not the phone bag, they're just like they're like a bubble wrap, a mail envelope, like bubble wrap to keep them safe. And teachers have them in their classroom, and they can just, and a student, hey, you put this away, and then it's in something that feels safe, and then that way that goes, so the phone's like, just feels a little bit safer and, private, if they're private, it's their, you know.
I would not have expected that, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the battle, is that when you confiscate it, but most, I mean, the parents, last year we experienced that the parents were, for the most part, understanding, were there to learn, and, one parent did tell me, her son was really angry and I was making him depressed. I was like, how am I doing that? Well, the phone thing, I'm taking his phone away, so I'm making him depressed, and I was like, then there's the problem.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think the kids are realizing it, the kids are, okay, it was the adults worrying more about it than really the kids and enforcing it, and, you know, so I think you're nodding and sharing is like the good.
I cried, like I went home and I cried, so I was like, we talked to each other. If we had 8 minutes of dead time, and it wasn't dead time, because they were like, can we borrow your deck of cards? Like, they talked to each other, and I was like, honestly, I don't even need to give you work, because they're just chatting and laughing. And it hasn't been like that really, so.
Even the assembly with all the kids, I was at the first PEP assembly, it was amazing, they weren't on their phones, and I spent about half an hour in Donna Barr's class that same day, and not a single phone in that class, and everyone was on task, everyone was working, they were all engaged, and they were all respectful, and it was really, I mean, she could get a lot of work done in there with those kids like that.
My last one is lunch, because it got brought up, and Elise had a concern, because I also had a concern, that they were leaving, they wanted their phone so bad, that the open campus, they would leave, just to go look at their phone rather than eat the food here. Well, there's obviously that financial issue. Has that gotten better?
I mean, it doesn't feel like more kids are leaving
Okay.
than normal. I mean, it's just juniors and seniors usually. We're not having, we had some kids that, like, they're not supposed to go out to the parking lot and hang out. That's like a no-no. So, like, I sound like a mom, sorry for that. So, if kids are going to their cars, they're leaving campus, they're not hanging out in their cars. It's so, you know, just patrolling the parking lot, so, it's not, it shouldn't be, unless they are truly leaving, but I think, you know, not more than normal kids seem to be leaving. Whether or not they're eating lunch like that, I don't know. Like, are you choosing not to eat lunch, or is your mom? I mean, I had said, like I told Kim, I said, I think, you know, like me, I'm like, I'm gonna be such a good mom this year. I'm gonna pack my kids' lunch every day, and it's week 2 and first stop, so maybe that will change. Yeah, I don't know if that's gonna be an issue. It does not seem like more kids than normal are leaving. I mean, even the kids sitting outside in the courtyard aren't on their phones. It's very wild. It's kind of a weird, you know, it's a honeymoon period. I get that, and maybe, you know, it'll change, but really, it seems to be really impactful. The ones, I think, challenge that kind of coming up is there's reasons that, especially at high school, where phones are a tool. So, like Daniel Rafferty was sharing in auto shop, like part of what they do and what you would do if you worked in an auto shop is you would take a picture of something you're taking apart, because I need to know what it looks like when I put it back together. We don't have we don't have cameras in there. We don't, so, like, to take the picture and then you download the picture. I mean, they're like adding a bunch of steps is something that's quick and easy. So when we kind of talk about like the educational needs and what that looks like, I think those were some questions. But
So there's no exception in there if a teacher wants to utilize the cell phone or whatever, iPad or whatever, as an educational tool in the governor's order?
Yeah,
there is. It's just like monitoring what is that. So if Rafferty's like, well, I'm going to use it for this because it makes sense, and then in science they want to take pictures of their, like, and then all of a sudden
Like we use the flashlight all the time, because it's easier to use without your phone, use it as a flashlight or a timer. But it's a slippery
That can
slope.
quickly
It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, it would be a slippery,
Right.
because with this, the flat out don't have it,
Right.
they'll find other ways to improvise
Right.
to get the same thing accomplished. You know, they might
Yeah.
learn what an egg timer is.
Right.
Some of
That's
us-
what- yeah.
Some
We did,
of
something
us survived the
super,
period of
we did
rotary
think
dial
about,
phones.
Which is a little bit concerning, is kids don't know how to read clocks.
Analog clock.
So,
I thought that
they
was
were
part of
asking if we
the
could
first
get
grade
clocks.
curriculum.
I bet we need to
Used to
bring
be.
some first grade teachers up to us. So they were saying, there we go. We need clocks in the building, and we were like, there's clocks all over the building. Well, we can't read those clocks.
Wow.
Because they have a phone that's a digital.
I totally believe it.
That is
I
sad.
add the 12 to the 4, so
Yeah.
it's 16
So it's-
minus.
And only those lakeshore clocks where it's like quarter past, half
So
past.
just, something that we didn't think about because they've grown up with a phone that's a digital.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
It's a third grade standard.
well, yeah, we're gonna work on
So
it.
they don't always get to it, but no, I teach it in fifth grade.
Okay, good to know.
Like, I took away my digital clock this year, and I said you have to read the digital or the analog to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So moving right along.
All right. Yes.
What we're gonna need to do is, of course, like with a lot of policies, when there's what we call first impression policies,
Right.
we're probably gonna need to review it as we go with the administrators, as we go through the year, and I'm sure at some point we'll come back to you with.
Tweak it.
Hey, here's how it goes, and if we need to tweak it,
Yeah.
Yep.
you know, I don't know anything so much that I can't admit when we made an error.
Yeah.
Right, and we'll come back and we'll adjust it.
Need to add something or take away something.
Yep, sounds
And
good.
Elise is monitoring the meals, so she's keeping an eye on that.
My last comment, KJ, is for you. I feel super blessed to have you.
Thank you.
This place has changed. You're a big part of it. You're an awesome person. Thank you for everything you do.
All right, well, thank you. The last three policies real quickly. JACD is just basically the medication one. It adds Narcan. It basically allows the employees to provide Narcan. And so, you know, in our training starting this year with our first aid trainings we had at the beginning of the year, Narcan is provided as part of that training. The JOA is the directory information. That update really, it reduces the amount of person identifiable information in the policies. It really is designed to prevent the doxing piece, where people can get a hold of people's phone numbers, and which used to be all directory information, basic, like address and phone numbers and whatnot. That removes it from that. And then the last policy, LBEA, I don't know if Kim might want to add on anything on this one, but this is the one where now it's a policy that the district can use to make that denial of when we have more than 3% of the students wanting to transfer to a virtual public school that's not offered by the district. And this policy allows Kim to be able to say, no, you know, you're not allowed to leave to go to that virtual public school. Doesn't prevent them from going to like a non-virtual, like say Catholic school or something. But if it's a public virtual school in another district, out of district, we have more than 3%, that's gone, she can turn off the SIP, right? So that's what that policy is.
I only had a comment or question, I guess, back on the medication AR. And my only comment was 11 pages. That's gonna take some extensive training of your personnel that is directly involved with that. Like, I know traditionally it's been secretaries and whoever.
Yeah.
And-
We've already trained them this year, but they'll have to have an update on
But
whatever
yeah,
the
'cause I thought-
updates are.
Whenever you're dealing with medication.
A lot of ins
rest
and outs
assured
there.
the
I mean,
lawyers have made
not that you could take anything away, but it's just,
Yeah, no, you're right.
I think just people need to understand what employees are having to deal with, you know, the 11 pages of standards to go by and protocols to follow.
Yeah,
Like
it's a
we
lot.
talked about the mandates on educators and I include
Big
classified
deal.
staff in that.
On the second reads, did we have anyone that had anything that we hadn't already talked about they wanted?
I will add on the bus discipline. I noticed you add principal to there, but in thinking of, yes, that works for our K-5s and our K-8s, but thinking middle school, high school, are they more likely to have an assistant principal being the one to do that discipline? So should it be school administrator instead of principal?
Good
Sure,
catch.
probably.
Okay.
We can make that change.
Good
You
catch.
get that?
Good catch.
You know that one?
Yeah, Debbie's got it, yep. Thanks, KJ.
Okay.
Okay. No one else, anything on the second read? Okay. Do we have anyone here for public comment? Do we have anyone online with their hand raised feature wanting to make public comment?
Nope, I don't see anybody.
Okay. Then we'll move to action items, and here I'm looking for a, to approve the superintendent evaluation timeline that Derek presented to us.
So moved.
I'll second.
Been moved and second to approve the 2025-2026 superintendent evaluation timeline. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Future agenda item requests. Are there any?
Not necessarily a request, but I have a clarification on the strategic plan process, and I got an email that said if we're interested in being on that thing, what's the status of that? Are we, is that gonna start soon? Are we?
Yeah, I did have 4 of you that were interested, and so,
Can arm wrestle?
yeah, I think we might have to, because like we shouldn't have a quorum on there, so we should only
No.
have 2 people. So Sarah was, Wally, Daniel, and I think Derek was the last one that was interested, and so we might have to, you know, arm wrestle for it. Yeah, see who really.
I'll start training.
Yeah, the meetings, I think our first meeting's in October, and the ESD's working on the schedule and the different
Okay.
agenda items, and their next step is to come to our administrative meeting and share the results from the ORIS survey that they took, and so our administrators did a really good job getting that turned in. They had them all last week, and so they want to go over those results with us, and that'll kind of that's kind of a needs assessment for each building that the administrators took, and so we'll go over those and go from there.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So I'm not sure how to figure out which of you to put on there.
Sure, you'll figure out a way.
You could put your name in a hat. I mean, we could do.
You could
Yeah.
have up to 3.
We could have 3, yes.
We did do that with bond advisory committee. I think we just make sure we never did over a quorum. So, which, speaking of that, we'd have to make sure that we're only a 6-group team right now.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that is true, yeah.
We have to make sure that we don't, if we do 3, that we wait till we have 7, right?
No, 3's doing.
No, our quorum has
Still
to
quorum.
change.
You know, 3's not quorum.
4 is
No,
still
4
a
is still a
quorum.
quorum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that, but I'm saying if we only have 6 members, 3 is technically a quorum, right?
No.
No,
It's not?
No,
no,
it's still
4
4,
is
okay.
our
4
quorum.
You have to have 50% plus
4,
1.
that doesn't change.
Good
4 is our
clarification.
quorum. So, okay, we're adjourned.